the West in de facto civil war as Cabal rule continues to collapse. Benjamin Fulford, February 2, 2015. Western civilization is now in a de facto state of civil war as Cabal rule continues to collapse. It is a financial, information and military war being waged by factions that transcend national borders. And it is coming to a climax. The main battlegrounds in the military sense are the Middle East, the Ukraine and Libya. What we see in each of the places is the Zionist faction fighting desperately for survival. In Libya and the Middle East they are fighting to seize oil resources needed to stave off bankruptcy. In the Ukraine, the Zionists, in addition to seeking gas, are fighting to create a new homeland for themselves after an expected expulsion from Israel and the United States. On the financial front, the European Union is struggling to prevent the new Greek government's vow to cancel debt from destroying the EU financial system. In the United States, the corporate government is frantically trying to scrape up survival money before February 17, the time they have been given to find funds after missing the January 31 payment deadline. There are also many other incidents taking place around the world connected the ongoing battle to end Babylonian debt slavery and free humanity. Let us start with a closer look at what is happening in the Ukraine. According to Russian intelligence, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko's real name is Izvaishman. Citing New York court records, the Russians say he is a dual Israeli-U.S. citizen of Romanian ancestry who took on his wife's name to appear Ukrainian. He was installed in power by a Zionist mercenary army as part of a project by a faction of Ashkenazi Jews seeking to reclaim their Khazarian homeland. According to the Times of Israel, a blue-ribbon team of scholars from leading research institutions and museums has just issued a secret report to the government, acknowledging that European Jews are in fact Khazars. The realization dawning on many Jews of European ancestry that Israel was never their ancestral homeland, together with dismal independent survival prospects for that colony of brainwashed militants, is what has led to the ongoing project to create Khazaria 2.0 in the Ukraine. This brings us to the mysterious fire last week at a Russian depository of ancient Slavic documents and many other rare and valuable documents. Was this arson aimed at destroying historical evidence backing Slavic claims for the Ukraine? It is a good guess. In any case, the plan to create a new Khazaria is not going well at all. For one thing, the would-be Khazarians, not to be mistaken for citizens of the modern nation-state of Kazakhstan, are using not very eager foreign mercenaries to fight for them against people fighting to defend their ancestral homeland. For another, the Western oil companies, who were the source of much of the financing for the mercenary army, are getting cold feet. Chevron, ExxonMobil, Marathon and Eni have all recently announced they are leaving the region. If I was a betting man, I would not bet on Khazaria 2.0. The situation in the Middle East is also looking grim for the Israelis and their ISIS mercenary army. What is going on with ISIS in the Middle East is really an American civil war by proxy. On the one hand, you have the Pentagon fighting against ISIS. On the other hand, ISIS recruiters captured in Pakistan and elsewhere are saying they are getting their funding from the United States. ISIS fighters are being treated in Israeli hospitals and ISIS propaganda is being sent out the world via Jerusalem, according to British intelligence. So here we have Pentagon troops fighting American-financed mercenaries using U.S. weapons and headed by an al-Baghdadi who is really Mossad agent Simon Elliott. If this is not civil war by proxy, what is it? A clear sign of this seen in the corporate media is the bitter rift between Pentagon spokesperson Barack Obama and top Zionist Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu is set to make a speech in March to the bribed acting troop known as the U.S. Congress and Senate. Obama is telling Netanyahu he is not welcome. CIA sources, meanwhile, are saying that Netanyahu is going to be killed by his own people. It is also now increasingly clear that the horrors in Congress and the Senate are no longer being offered the fascist security presence they are used to. Take a look at this widely broadcast video to see what I mean. This sort of event inside a government hearing would have been unthinkable a couple of years ago. Many of the protesters seen there calling Henry Kissinger a war criminal are, by the way, Jewish, according to a Washington-based source who works with them. Meanwhile, the U.S. corporate government faction supporting Obama is also in trouble. The Asian elders refuse to roll over U.S. corporate debt that came due on January 31st, according to Chinese government sources. That is why the Obama regime is trying to finance itself with a series of drastic tax hikes mislabeled Obamacare. Obama has also announced plans to seize money being earned or held overseas by U.S. corporations. The backing of the U.S. dollar with gold is also adding to U.S. woes because a strong dollar is very bad for the real U.S. economy. In January, 87% of U.S. companies lowered their earnings expectations because of the impact of the strong dollar. They are hurting because they cannot competitively export with the dollar at current rates. As mentioned many times in the past, the interests of the international U.S. dollar and the U.S. economy are at odds. The U.S. dollar is now linked to gold, the Chinese yuan, the pound sterling and the Swiss franc. It is not an American currency. The Americans need to issue their own independent currency. The financial situation in Europe is even worse than that of the US. It turns out the reason the EU is so reluctant to reduce Greek debt is that a house of cards of over $100 trillion worth of derivatives would collapse if the Greek bond card was taken out at the bottom. However, the new Greek government is determined to stop the looting of the Greek economy to support bankers. Symbolically, one of new Greek President Alexis Tsipras' first moves as president was to lay flowers at a spot where Nazis murdered members of the Greek resistance during World War II. He claims Germany still owes Greece 160 billion euros in compensation for Nazi war crimes. Tsipras has been assigned Russian Special Forces troops to prevent his assassination, according to U.S. naval intelligence. Now, the French, Spanish and Italian governments are all now supporting the cancellation of Greek debt. This is because they are all also being crushed by debt burdens. Another sign the Western Babylonian debt slavery is in trouble is the fact that 16% of government bonds issued worldwide now offer negative interest rates. Denmark has even started issuing mortgages with a minus 0.3% interest rate. This sounds like a bargain until you realize that all the bank is doing is putting numbers in a computer saying they have rights to 20 or 30 years worth of a large percentage of the mortgage holder's hard-earned income. People are catching on to this now in increasing numbers and have begun to demand the abolishment of debt slavery. There has also been a break in the ongoing secret investigation of Cabal nuclear terror incidents like 311, according to MI5 British intelligence. UK Prime Minister James Cameron has been connected to arms deals ever since his first job at Conservative Central Office on coming down from Oxford. This involved the brokering of 6 nuclear warheads manufactured in a joint South African-Israeli project in the 1970s-80s through John Breedenkamp. Israel's Netanyahu has also been extensively fingered by the Pentagon and others as being involved in nuclear terror incidents including 311. These people will soon have nowhere to hide and no one to protect them. The purported beheading, as multiple corporate media reports put it, of a Japanese journalist last week by ISIS was another turning point. The Japanese know who is really behind ISIS and will be seeking revenge. Finally, there was one very promising bit of information sent to this writer last week by Jewish Kabbalists. They claimed the recent false flag incident in France involving the supposed murder of journalist at the magazine Charlie Hebdo was a secret message. According to them, Hebdo means 7, Herpta in Greek, and symbolizes not only the Sabbath but also a once in 7 years rest for the land jubilee or cancellation of debt and distribution of assets. From the book of Deuteronomy, at the end of every 7 years, you shall celebrate the remission year. The idea of the remission year is that every creditor shall remit any debt owed by his neighbor and brother when God's remission year comes around. They also spoke of a once in 49 years jubilee when not only was debt cancelled but land was redistributed. It sounds like they are trying to negotiate a surrender.